the stump of Jesse. I bring it out every Christmas, and my son rolls his eyes. But that's what the story is about. Once upon a time, not too many years ago, 45 or so, there was a small church in a small county seat town in one of the most rural parts of Missouri. Church was small in numbers and also small in spirit. The church had the reputation of being the most cantankerous church of any denomination in the city, in Lincoln County, in the whole state of Missouri. And from meeting the people, I thought that might be true. However, it was the churchiest church in town. It was built in the mid-1800s. It was beautiful, a two-story edifice with the sanctuary on the second floor like the upper room, the unair-conditioned sanctuary, where I learned not to have church upstairs but downstairs in the air conditioning when it was above 90 at 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning in the summer. On August the 1st, 1979, I became the gift of God to Troy Presbyterian Church. Personally, I often thought of it as the whited sepulchre. It was known to pray on my way home, God, it's a good thing they're Presbyterian because they sure aren't Christian. It was my first time being a minister of last resort in a conflict-burdened church. I learned I was pretty good at it, and it's pretty much fun, because all you have to do is love them, and it so surprises them that they change. Now, the reason the people of that church had a burden of hurt was their pride. They had just run another minister out of town. The average stay of a minister was about 18 months to sometimes 2 years. Troy was a kind of small town where you felt everyone else was watching you, and the preacher they had just run out of town from marrying the woman he was giving marriage counseling to was ashamed that they had called such a man. So some people stayed away from church because they had run another minister out of town and everyone was laughing at them about it. Other people stayed away from church because they were embarrassed to be seen there. Some people stayed away because they were tired of having to do everything in the church. Others stayed away because they were tired of the people who were doing everything who wouldn't let them do it. They needed to talk better amongst themselves, and probably the only church that ever had that problem, right?
Right.
Now they had me as their new minister, and that really wasn't much better because they knew they had to take what Presbytery told them to take, or they'd never get another minister. I was what they could afford because I could work part-time. My husband had the churches up north of them, so I had to do something, and I was qualified, so, well, I was the right price, and they might as well take me. There were about 100 members, but my first Sunday there were 5 of them, including me in worship. By the time I left, we regularly had about 55 or 60, so things worked. as Christmas got closer, the meager little crowd began to grow a little larger. And I would preach and talk about peace and reconciliation and love and joy and all those Christmassy things. And they didn't want those sermons. They knew all about Christmas. Myra told me one time, I've heard every sermon there is to hear. I just come to see how you're going to work it out. That was actually the best bit of sermon writing advice I ever got. How am I going to work out what they already know? They began to do the things they were supposed to do at Christmas. They went and found all the decorations. They roped the kids into doing Advent stuff. They sort of planned a Christmas program. And then it was time to put up the Christmas tree. Well, when you're a small town in the middle of nowhere in Missouri, you don't go buy a Christmas tree. You go out to someone's farm and you cut it down. And they warned me how when you do that, the tree outside always looks smaller than it looks inside. And you always have to cut some of it off in order to get it in. So we cut the first tree for while I was there. This is the part of the stump we had to cut off to get it into the church. Stump of Jesse. I've kept it now for, 79 to 22 is about almost 50 years. 45, 46 years. A long time that I've been carrying this. Ought to be really good firewood by the time my son inherits it. And so I went home, and Jim and I did the same thing. We cut down a tree and took it inside. Now, remembering we're first year out of seminary, the Christmas decorations that we had, I learned to make these things in the garden club. This fine quilted ball, I see a few ladies nodding their heads. You're around from the late 70s. It's a styrofoam ball that you just sort of poke material into and make it look like it's quilted. But you can drop it and all it does is bounce. Forgive me for doing it on the altar. We decorated it with some balls like that, some pine cones that I had spray painted and glittered. I think we had one strand of lights and a popcorn chain. So I was telling some man at the church about this. Now, Leroy was so far out on the know. I knew things three days before he did, and he was a native. But he went around telling people about my Christmas tree. And all these cantankerous people decided to do something about it. So one lady, whose pride would not let her come to church, brought me several glittery silver bells. And she says, someone gave me these and I don't like them, so I'm giving them. This is so like Troy, Missouri. So I'm giving them to you. I have 5 more just like it at home. 40-something years later. Another grandmother brought by some red berries that she said she was crocheting to put on tops of packages, and a Santa Claus face for the same purpose. And she says, I just went overboard, and I hear you need some decorations. Dr. Joe wandered in with a fistful of old-fashioned Christmas tree balls. These were actual glass. If I took them somewhere now, they're real expensive because they're vintage and collectible, probably hand-blown and hand-painted. But he just brought them by because he says, my wife is decorating the tree, and she says we got too many ornaments and you need these. A shut-in who also crocheted sent a small angel that can perch very nicely on the top of a tree. And the lady who brought it for her was so embarrassed that she went to Walmart and got one of the crystal ornaments that are really plastic because she thought they were cute. Jay Ledoux came by and says, open my present right now. It's a wonderful bell. I use this bell every single one of the 15 Christmases we had the Basset Hound. The Basset Hound hated the bell sound. So I would pull it up first, ring the bell, and put it on the bottom of the tree where she could see it. She never messed with my Christmas tree. There was a girl about my age who was also roped into joining the garden club. We had to do a gifts exchange, so we each bought a ornament the other person liked at a show, and we cheated. So I got that one, and she got another ornament. So it continued day after day. People kept stopping at my office, bringing a gift of this or a gift of that. They didn't know how to get along with each other, but they knew how to live out Christmas. Somehow, something happened in that church over that first Christmas, and they began to heal. You've heard this story before, right? The Apostle Paul, Ebenezer Scrooge, the Grinch. It's a true story. The gospel changes life. Peace on earth, goodwill to all. Peace on earth and mercy mild. God and those sinners from Troy or wherever reconciled. Troy still holds on to its reputation as a cantankerous church, but probably not the most cantankerous church in Missouri any longer. I'm here to tell you that I survived not 1 year, not 2 years, but 3 years, 6 months, 2 weeks, and 1 day. But who's counting? In 2031, that church will be 200 years old. I'm still the minister with the longest ranking tenure in the 191 history of that church. They learned from me. I learned from them what it means to live into Christmas. That's the short version of the story, because being one-armed and one-legged and a guest minister in the church, it's hard to figure out how to show things. But that is a story that brings me joy this time every year when I remember how the gospel does come down. Remember what John said. It's true. God so loved this cantankerous world that he sent his only Son, that whoever, even the most cantankerous whatever, will not be condemned, but be saved. Friends, we draw closer to Christmas. Live into its joy. Let there be life. Let there be hope. Let there be love. And let there be joy. Amen.